Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise to bring you the essential insights you need to be truly well-informed. Today, we're embarking on a crucial journey, one we're calling Exposing the Truth in the Digital Evidence. Our mission: to demystify the complex, yet absolutely fundamental world of computer forensics. Specifically, we're focusing on data acquisition. We'll be pulling key concepts and, practical knowledge from the foundational textbook by Nelson and Stewart. Now, if you're a student at the Dr. Sam Pack College of Business, perhaps in BBA, Management Information Systems, BAAS and Information Technology, or our BS in Computer Information Systems programs, well, especially those of you specializing in computer forensics, this deep dive is tailor-made for you. But honestly, if you're any college student curious about the digital realm, or maybe a working professional with an interest in digital investigations, you'll find immense value in understanding how digital evidence is properly and, ethically collected. It's all about getting to the undeniable truth hidden in the data. Before we jump in, though, a quick reminder.
If you find value in our discussions, please consider liking, subscribing, following, sharing, and commenting wherever you listen. Your engagement truly helps us reach more curious minds like yours. Okay, let's unpack this. So, to start our journey into data acquisition, we first need to understand the very foundation. How is digital evidence actually stored? Because the format of that storage isn't just some technical detail, right? It absolutely affects how you can acquire and later analyze the data. Why does it matter so much in forensics?
That's exactly the place to start. Think of it like needing the right key for a lock. If you don't understand the storage format, you can't reliably get the data out. Our sources highlight 3 primary storage formats for digital evidence, and each one has its own, let's say, quirks and critical implications for a forensic examiner.
Okay, 3 main types. What's the first one?
First up, we have raw format. This is basically a bit-for-bit copy of the original data written directly to a file. Pure and simple, kinda. Its major advantage is speed. It's incredibly fast to transfer data this way.
Speed, okay.
That's always good.
Definitely. And it can also ignore minor read errors on a source drive, which, can be a lifesaver when you're dealing with damaged media. Plus, nearly all computer forensics tools can read raw format, making it incredibly universal.
Universal and fast. Sounds pretty good so far. What's the catch?
Well, the big one is storage space. Raw format demands just as much storage as the original disk, byte for byte.
So if you're imaging a massive hard drive, say several terabytes, you need an equally massive destination drive. No compression, nothing.
Right, that could be a real problem.
And here's another critical point. Some tools using raw format might not capture those marginal or bad sectors. And sometimes that's exactly where crucial evidence might be hiding.
Okay, so fast and universal, but a potential storage nightmare, and it might miss some hidden corners. That sounds like a significant trade-off. What's next?
Exactly. It's always about trade-offs in this field, Next, we have proprietary formats. These are specific to certain forensic tools or vendors. They often offer really powerful features like compression.
Compression. That would solve the storage issue, wouldn't it?
It certainly helps. It can significantly reduce the amount of storage needed for an image. They can also split large images into smaller, more manageable segmented files, which makes transfer and storage much easier. And a big one, they can integrate metadata, information about the acquisition itself, like timestamps, examiner notes, case details, directly into the image file.
Metadata baked right in? That sounds vital for chain of custody.
Absolutely vital. But you mentioned proprietary setting off alarm bells.
Yeah, it usually means things don't play nicely together.
You're spot on.
Yeah.
The primary disadvantage is exactly that. Vendor lock-in. You often can't easily share an image created by one tool with a different tool from another vendor. It's like trying to open, a weird old document format that only one program understands.
Frustrating.
It can be a significant hurdle if you need to collaborate or maybe switch software later on. Plus, while they can split files, there might be file size limitations for each segmented volume. Our sources do note that among these, the expert witness compression format, EO1 files usually, is kind of the unofficial industry standard right now, so there's some interoperability there.
Okay, so an unofficial standard helps a bit. What's the third option?
Finally, we arrive at the Advanced Forensics Format, or AFF. This was specifically developed by Dr. Simpson L. Garfinkel to tackle some of these challenges head-on. AFF aims to produce compressed or uncompressed image files, crucially, without any size restriction for the disk-to-image files.
No size restriction. Nice.
Yeah, and it's built to be extensible, meaning it can adapt to future needs. And the really big deal, It's open source.
Open source. Okay, that is a big deal in forensics.
It really is. It promotes transparency, means it can be used across different platforms and operating systems, and allows the whole community to scrutinize and improve it. AFF also includes internal consistency checks for self-authentication. That's a game changer for proving image integrity in court. You'll often see .afd for segmented image files and .afm for its metadata file.
Right, transparency and integrity. Sounds like AFF has a lot going for it. Okay, that's a great breakdown of the formats. So we know the blueprints, but a blueprint alone won't solve a case. The real challenge, and where many investigations succeed or fail, lies in the acquisition itself. How do we actually go about safely and accurately pulling this information?
Exactly. This is where the rubber meets the road for investigators. When it comes to actually getting the data, we have two main approaches, basically dictated by whether the suspect system is on or off. First, there's static acquisition. This is really the gold standard if you can do it.
Gold standard. Why is that?
Because it's used when a suspect drive can be completely powered down and critically write protected. That prevents any alteration. If it's preserved correctly, static acquisitions are repeatable. You can make another identical image later if needed.
Repeatable. Okay, that sounds forensically sound.
Very. But then there's live acquisition. This is what you have to do when you simply cannot shut down a suspect computer.
Like, if shutting it down loses crucial data?
Precisely. Maybe you'd lose critical volatile data in RAM, stuff that disappears when the power goes off. Or perhaps you're monitoring a live network intrusion and shutting down the machine would kill your investigation.
So it's like trying to capture evidence while the crime scene is still active, almost.
That's a good analogy. And within those two types, static and live, there are 4 different methods for how you actually grab the data. The most common is creating a disk-to-image file. As the name suggests, it's usually a bit-for-bit copy of the entire drive, or maybe a partition, saved as a single file or multiple segmented files. Uses those formats we just talked about.
Okay, disk-to-image. Makes sense.
Then there's a disk-to-disk copy. This is a direct, sector-by-sector duplicate of one physical drive onto another physical drive, like cloning.
Got it. A direct clone.
We also have logical disk-to-disk or disk-to-data file copies. Here, you're not copying the entire physical disk, but targeting specific files, folders, or partitions you're interested in.
So more targeted.
Exactly. And finally, creating a sparse data copy. Now, the distinction here is important. Logical acquisition just captures specific existing files or file types. Say, you just grab the Outlook PST email files or all the JPEGs. Sparse acquisition is similar. It's targeted, but it goes a step further. It also tries to collect fragments of data from the unallocated or empty space and maybe deleted file remnants.
Ah, so sparse tries to get the deleted stuff too. That sounds incredibly useful.
It can be. It's great for recovering evidence the suspect thought they'd erased.
That distinction is really key. It sounds like you're not always trying to grab absolutely everything then. So what are the biggest things you consider when deciding which method to use?
Well, several factors come into play.
Hmm.
The first is pretty obvious. The size of the source disk.
Right, like that raw format issue.
Exactly. For really large drives, maybe huge servers, full disk-to-image copies might just be impractical. You might not have enough storage space, or it would take days. That's when logical or sparse acquisition becomes more appealing, maybe using lossless compression too. You also need to consider whether the suspect's original disk can actually be retained as evidence, or if you have to give it back.
Good point.
Then there's the time available. Sometimes you only have a very limited window to perform the acquisition. And of course, the physical location of the evidence matters. Is it easily accessible in a lab, or is it inside a running server in a data center miles away?
Okay, size, retention, time, location. Lots to juggle.
So once we've considered all that, how do we make sure we don't damage or lose evidence during this process? What's the contingency plan?
Contingency planning is absolutely critical. You often only get one shot, especially with live systems or volatile data. The first rule is simple, but vital. Duplicate your evidence copies.
Make backups. Always. Never ever work solely on your original acquisition. Always make at least one working copy, preferably 2, and secure the original. Secondly, it's often wise to acquire more than one image of the evidence, maybe using different tools or techniques if possible.
Why use different tools?
It provides redundancy, and it can help validate the acquisition. If 2 different tools produce images with the same hash value, that builds confidence. It also guards against potential bugs or limitations in a single tool. A crucial and often overlooked consideration is dealing with host-protected areas, or HPAs.
HPAs, what are those exactly?
Think of them as hidden compartments on a hard drive. They're usually reserved by the manufacturer for diagnostic programs or system recovery tools, and they're generally not visible to the operating system or standard disk tools.
Hidden areas, so evidence could be hidden there.
Potentially, yes. Or malware could be hidden there. A robust acquisition strategy must account for these hidden areas. Your tool needs to be able to detect and image the HPA, otherwise you might miss something crucial.
Wow, okay. Hidden areas, what else?
And then there's the growing challenge of encrypted drives, especially whole disk encryption.
Ah, yeah. Everything's encrypted these days.
It feels like it. Imagine getting access to a suspect's laptop, only to find the entire drive is scrambled with something like BitLocker or File Vault. It's not just a password on a file. Every single sector is unreadable gibberish.
So a standard static acquisition won't work?
Nope. You'll just get encrypted junk. You either need the decryption key or password, or maybe you need to perform a live acquisition while the system is running and unlocked, or use specialized tools that can handle the decryption. It completely changes the game.
That's a huge hurdle. Encrypted drives, hidden areas.
Wow.
Okay, now that we understand the methods and some challenges, what actual tools do forensic examiners use? Let's maybe start with Windows-based tools, since that's probably what most people are familiar with.
Sure. Windows-based tools offer convenience, no doubt. Especially with things like USB 3 and hot swappable devices, it can be quite efficient. However, they come with a critical caveat. You absolutely must use a reliable, well-tested, write-blocking hardware device.
Write blocker. Why is that so important with Windows?
Because Windows is designed to be helpful. It loves to automatically mount drives, write log files, update timestamps, even index files the moment you connect a drive. Any one of those actions could alter the evidence drive, instantly compromising your case. A hardware write blocker physically prevents any write commands from reaching the evidence disk.
Okay, so a hardware write blocker is non-negotiable for Windows static acquisitions.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And remember, as we mentioned, most standard Windows tools typically cannot acquire data from a disk's host-protected area. That remains a limitation.
Right, the HPA blind spot.
There is a clever workaround for some Windows scenarios, though. Mini-WinFE boot CDs and USB drives.
Mini-WinFE.
Yeah, it's basically a stripped-down Windows pre-installation environment, like a boot disk. But it's specially configured for forensics. You can build one that includes a registry modification to automatically mount any connected drives as read-only.
Ah, like a software write blocker built into the boot environment.
Exactly. It's a neat solution for certain situations, especially fieldwork.
Okay. What about outside of Windows? You mentioned Linux earlier.
Right. Shifting to acquiring data with a Linux boot CD often gives you a more inherently forensic-friendly environment.
Yeah.
Many forensic Linux live CDs, things like Kane, Deft, Kali Linux, Sans Sift, are specifically configured not to automatically mount connected media or to mount them as read-only by default.
So less risk of accidentally writing to the evidence.
Generally, yes. This design often eliminates the need for a separate hardware write blocker, which can simplify your kit. Plus, these Linux environments are usually packed with powerful command-line forensic utilities.
So Linux offers some built-in safeguards. What are some of the key commands or tools within that Linux world?
Within Linux, probably the most fundamental command is DD. It stands for dump data, though some old-timers jokingly call it disk destroyer, because if you mix up the input and output, yeah, you need to be careful. But DD is incredibly versatile for reading and writing raw data block by block. It's often used to create those raw format image files we discussed.
Simple, but powerful.
Exactly. Its simplicity is its strength, but it lacks advanced forensic features like built-in hashing as it runs, or detailed error logging, or a progress bar even. That's where dcfldd comes in.
dcfldd sounds like DADD.
It is. Think of dcfldd as the forensically enhanced version of DD, developed by the U.S. Department of Defense Cyber Crime Center. It adds crucial capabilities like on-the-fly hashing. It can calculate MD5 or SHA hashes while imaging.
Oh, that's useful, hashing as you go.
Yeah, and it can log errors to an output file, show you the progress, and even has an option to verify the acquired data against the original source hash afterwards. It's much better suited for forensic work than plain DD.
Okay, dcfldd sounds like the one to use in Linux if you can. What about popular Windows programs again? Any specific imager tools?
Sure. On the Windows side, a very widely used program, especially since there's a free version, is Access Data FTK Imager Lite.
FTK Imager, right, I've heard of that.
It's part of Access Data's broader forensic toolkit suite. FTK Imager is excellent for previewing evidence disks without making changes, assuming you have that write blocker, and for creating disk-to-image copies. It can image at both the logical partition level and the physical drive level. It also supports creating segmented image files and can even image the live RAM on a running computer.
Imaging RAM, too. That's important for live acquisition.
Definitely. But again, the same caveats apply. You need that right protection in place, either hardware or something like Mini-WinFE. An FTK Imager, like most Windows tools, typically cannot acquire data from a drive's HPA.
Got it. Still need that write blocker and still might miss the HPA.
This naturally raises a really important question. After all that effort, choosing the format, the method, the tool, carefully connecting everything, how do we actually know the image file we created is an exact, perfect, uncompromised copy of the original evidence?
Yeah, how do you prove it?
Validation is arguably the most critical aspect of computer forensics. Without validation, the evidence might be worthless in court.
Absolutely. So what does that validation process look like? How do you prove its integrity?
Validation requires using a hashing algorithm utility. We mentioned hashing with dcfldd. These algorithms, common ones are MD5, SHA1, SHA2506, even SHA512, now perform a complex mathematical calculation on the entire dataset. The result is a relatively short, unique string of characters, like a digital fingerprint.
A fingerprint for the data.
Exactly. If even a single bit changes in that massive dataset, one tiny alteration, the resulting hash value will be completely different. It provides incredibly strong proof of integrity, or lack thereof.
Okay, so you hash the original, hash the copy, and they have to match perfectly.
Precisely. That's the goal. For Linux validation methods, you can use built-in commands like md5sum and Chessum directly on the suspect device, if it's write-blocked, or, more commonly, on the acquired image file. You run it on the source, run it on the image, and compare the outputs. And as we said, if you use dcfldd to acquire the data, it has built-in validation features. Its hash option calculates hashes during the acquisition, hashlog saves those results to a text file for your case notes, and the VF option lets you verify the image file against the source later.
That integration in dcfldd sounds really efficient.
It is. Now, when it comes to Windows validation methods, standard Windows installs don't really have user-friendly, built-in hashing tools designed for this kind of forensic work.
Really? Nothing built in?
Not in the same easy command line way as Linux MD5sum or Chessum for entire drives or images. So you generally need to rely on third-party utilities, or often the validation features built into the commercial digital forensic suite you're using, like Ncase, FTK, Xways, etc. They all have robust hashing and verification functions.
Okay, so commercial tools usually handle it.
Yes, but it's also crucial to remember that raw format image files, while universal, lack that integrated metadata layer that proprietary or AFF formats have. So even if your tool validates it, it's often recommended to perform a separate manual validation using a known hashing tool for all raw acquisitions, just as an extra check. Document everything.
Double-checking makes sense, especially with raw images. That's a vital step ensuring the integrity. Now let's maybe tackle some more complex scenarios. What happens when the evidence isn't just on a single drive, but maybe on a RAID system? Those can be huge and spread out, right?
Oh, absolutely. RAID adds another layer of complexity.
And what about getting data from a computer across a network where you can't physically touch the machine?
Right. Those are definitely advanced scenarios. Let's start with performing RAID data acquisitions. First off, RAID stands for Redundant Array of Independent Disks. It's a setup using two or more disks together, usually for better performance or data redundancy or both.
Like in servers or high-end workstations.
Exactly. You see it a lot in servers, network-attached storage, NAS, sometimes even desktops. The challenge is data isn't just stored sequentially on one disk. In common levels like RAID 0 striping or RAID 5 striping with parity, data blocks are spread across multiple physical disks.
So you can't just image one disk and get everything.
Nope. You usually need to image all the member disks of the RAID array first. Then you need specialized software that understands the specific RAID level, like RAID 0, 1, 5, 6, 10, the block size, the disk order, etc., to virtually reconstruct the logical volume from those separate images.
Wow, okay. That sounds complicated.
It can be. And the biggest practical concern with RAID forensics is often sheer size. Many modern RAID systems push well into the tens or hundreds of terabytes, sometimes even petabytes or exabytes in large enterprises. Just acquiring and storing the images of all the member disks is a monumental task.
Exabytes. Wow, so acquiring the whole thing might be impossible.
Often impractical, yes. When acquiring RAID disks, the main concerns are, how much storage space do I need for the acquisition? What's the exact RAID type and its parameters? Do I have all the correct drives? Do I have the right acquisition tool that can handle this specific RAID setup? And can my analysis tool reconstruct the RAID from the acquired images?
So for those massive RAID systems, maybe you go back to logical or sparse acquisition.
Precisely. For very large RAID systems where acquiring the entire multi-terabyte array isn't feasible or necessary, sparse or logical acquisition becomes the practical approach. You target just the specific user data, databases, or partitions relevant to the investigation, rather than trying to image every single sector of every single drive.
Makes sense. Are there specific tools good at RAID?
Yes, many of the major forensic suites have pretty robust RAID acquisition and reconstruction capabilities. Guidance software Ncase, X-Ways Forensics, Access Data FTK, runtime software, RTools technologies, they all offer functions to deal with various RAID levels.
Okay. Now what about that other scenario, remote acquisition, getting data over a network?
Right, using remote network acquisition tools. The concept is straightforward. You connect to a suspect computer remotely, over a network, and copy data from it without needing physical access.
Sounds convenient, maybe even essential sometimes.
It can be, especially in corporate investigations, incident response across different locations, or maybe situations where the machine can't be shut down or moved. However, it comes with significant drawbacks.
Like what?
Well, think about what's running on most computers. Antivirus, anti-spyware, maybe host-based intrusion detection systems, firewalls. All these security tools can interfere with or completely block your remote connection or data transfer attempts.
The computer's own defenses might fight back.
Exactly. And worse, if the suspect has administrator rights on their machine, they could have installed their own security tools designed to detect or block forensic activity, potentially tipping them off that an investigation is happening. It's a real digital cat-and-mouse game.
That's tricky. So what kind of tools are built for this kind of remote access challenge?
Several specialized tools exist. ProDiscover Incident Response is one. It's designed for live response and can capture volatile system state information, analyze running processes, locate hidden files, check network ports, and acquire data remotely. Its remote agent, called PD server, needs to be loaded onto the suspect computer somehow, which is often the tricky part. But once loaded, it can potentially run in stealth mode or even have its process name disguised to look like a normal OS function. It also usually includes security features like password protection and encryption for the connection and data transfer.
Stealth mode, okay.
Ncase Enterprise, now part of OpenText, is another major player, especially for large organizations. It's designed for searching and collecting data across potentially thousands of computers spread over wide geographical areas.
Dozens, wow.
Yeah, it supports multiple operating systems, file systems, can perform quick triage to see if a system warrants deeper investigation, and can sometimes analyze multiple systems simultaneously. Guidance software was really a pioneer in this enterprise-scale remote forensic space.
Okay, in case for the big jobs. Any others?
Sure. RTools RStudio, which is primarily known as a data recovery suite, also has capabilities to connect to remote computers and perform raw format acquisitions. Whetstone US LTT Pre-RO is another tool specifically designed to connect remotely and perform live acquisitions of drives. And there's F-Response, which is quite interesting. It's a vendor-neutral specialty tool. It basically acts like a bridge. It presents the remote suspect's drives, physical or logical, as if they were locally connected to the examiner's machine, usually via an ISC-SI connection.
So F-Response lets you use your own preferred forensic tools to examine the remote drive.
Exactly. It makes the remote drive accessible to almost any tool that can work with a local drive, which offers a lot of flexibility. It comes in different versions for different scenarios.
That sounds very useful. Are there any other miscellaneous tools worth mentioning quickly?
Yeah, a few others our sources mention. Passmark Software Image USB is handy for creating bootable USB flash drives, including those Mini-WinFE environments we talked about. ASR Data Smart is noted for being robust at reading data from drives with bad sectors and can mount drives in write protected mode. Utilities and runtime software, like their Disk Explorer tools for FAT or NTFS, can create raw images, segment them, and access network drives. There's also mention of iLook Investigator, iSimager, and of course, SourceForge is always a good place to look for various open source forensic tools that might be current or emerging.
Wow, okay. We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today, seriously. From the basic formats of digital evidence right through to complex stuff like RAID and remote acquisitions. It's really clear that understanding these methods, these tools, these challenges It isn't just academic theory, is it? It's absolutely vital for anyone entering or working in computer forensics. It truly is about exposing the truth in the digital evidence, like we said at the start. And knowing how to properly acquire that evidence without altering it, well, that's the first most critical step in any digital investigation.
Couldn't agree more. Get the acquisition wrong, and everything that follows is potentially compromised.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope this exploration has given you, our listeners, some valuable insights and maybe helped clarify some of these pretty complex concepts in data acquisition. And here's a final thought for you to chew on. Given the constant evolution we see in storage technologies, faster SSDs, cloud storage everywhere, new file systems, and also increasingly sophisticated encryption methods, what do you think will be the next major challenge for digital evidence acquisition in the coming years? What's the next thing that's going to keep forensic examiners up at night? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments wherever you're listening. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, and share this deep dive with others, maybe fellow students or colleagues who might benefit from it. Until next time, keep digging for that truth.